Welcome to Walker Talk, brought to you by Barely Sober News. This week's episode of The Walking Dead is Season 7, Episode 1. The day will come when you won't be. My name is George Pecoraro, and with me is John Smithson. And in this episode, we had Abraham and Glenn both die. Carl almost got his hand chopped off, and Rick isn't the leader anymore in The Walking Dead. So, John, what do you think of this episode? Would you rate it?
I thought it was really good, to be honest. I still think they messed up a little bit with the whole cliffhanger thing last season in terms of, getting me excited about it. But I thought the episode itself was fantastic, so probably like a 9.
Right. Yeah, that's freaking high as hell. I've never given a 9. I agree. I thought the episode was great, but, I think just with the whole cliffhanger thing, I was kind of, done with it. Just, give me the answers and, let's move on with it. This whole episode was just the answer. So it was kind of like an hour of what happened in season 6, you know? And I'm giving it a 6.9 just on the fact that we were surprised by 2 people died instead of 1. You know? That's just how I feel.
I think
about
my
it.
9 is more on the scale of Walking Dead scale. I don't know if that makes any sense, but comparatively, I thought it was fantastic for what they usually do.
You're okay. Then then I think that's a justifiable rating. I mean, when we did the season 6 finale, it was me, you, and Chris, and we guessed who died. And was it you and Chris both said Glenn, and I said Abraham? Neither of us were right, but we weren't wrong, I guess. I mean, all 3 of us called out who it was. So when Abraham died, I was just I was actually very disappointed. I don't know, it's just because in the comic books, if you don't know, Glenn is the one who dies, and Abraham doesn't even exist in the comic books. So the fact that Abraham died, I was just that was just easy. He just killed someone that wasn't even in the comic books, and it was, it doesn't really affect the story too much. And Abraham, I don't think was a beloved character as much as other characters are. So I didn't think it was a big deal. And then Negan cracked Glenn in the skull, had a bat mark in his head with his eye popping out. Which I was oh, okay, and then, Glenn died, which, Glenn died and which I guess was more true to the comic books, but I felt like it was still safe because, again, Abraham isn't in the comics and Glenn is the one who dies in the comics. So it's kind of what we expected mostly for the past, 6 or so months.
I think it was, I definitely think it was a little bit of a curveball with the Glenn thing, only because no one expected 2 people to die. So, you see Abraham get killed, and you're okay, it's Abraham. Kind of thought that was going to happen. It's a little cop-outy because he's not a main character, but still, well enough liked. So, but then, essentially Daryl gets Glenn killed.
Right, because Daryl kind of loses it and punches him.
Yeah, and he's that shit can't happen. So, if he wouldn't have done that, Glenn would still be alive.
Right, and now he's held captive. Daryl. I don't know, I feel like it was okay, we kind of screwed up season 6, the end of season 6. So how can we throw a curveball at them? And so they killed 2 people. You know what I mean? And no one thought of that. Everyone was at least picking one person to die. I mean, it seems like they all shot the scenes when they got hit in the head with the bat, because Rick throughout the episode kept having flashbacks or visions of other people getting hit with Lucille.
And that part was kind of annoying when they the first 15 minutes when you still didn't know, and you're okay, enough with the teasing. It wasn't it was trying to gain that suspense back, you know what I mean, from what they lost with the cliffhanger, but it wasn't as suspenseful as it was, alright, can we just find out already? Can you just kill him?
Yeah. Yeah, kill somebody here. I think it was 22 minutes into the episode, we finally find out. And that was just a grueling 22 minutes. And I honestly didn't think we were going to find out, at all. I thought they were going to screw us again, and I was going to lose my stuff, to be honest. But, I mean, I'm kind of glad they kind of stayed true to the comics, I guess, and didn't wuss out and actually kill Glenn and and Abraham. I mean, I think Abraham's really expendable, so I don't feel like it's that big a deal. As far as Glenn, it's kind of sad for Maggie that she's gone.
The Glenn death was great, like because they showed it, we got to see it, so it was awesome to see. But I found, and I don't know if I'm like in the minority in terms of fans here, but I just found myself like, I don't know, not caring as much just because of like I said, I don't want to keep bringing it back to the cliffhanger because I'm so tired of talking about it, but like they kind of lost that suspense a little bit. You know what I mean? Like he killed him off, and I was like, oh shit, Glenn just died. But it wasn't like, oh my god, they just killed off Glenn. Like for me, it was just like, oh shit, he just killed Glenn. It was just like,
like okay, like you're right. We were just tired. Like we said it was a great episode, but I feel like we're just tired of like the teasing. Like just give it to us already. Like we were just kind of like, I'm watching it like, okay, like great, like this is nice. Rick isn't in control anymore. Okay, what's next? Like I'm I'm kind of like, what's next? I kind of like want them to speed it up. I can't take it.
I do think the episode was great though. They did a good job.
Yeah, they did a good job on the episode. So it was a great episode that was ruined by all this teasing. Whatever. Let's just go on from there. So, I mean, let's just touch upon Carl almost getting his arm cut off.
Right.
I was kind of surprised by that, and I thought that was kind of cool. And I really thought Rick was going to do it. Negan was going to make him do it. And I believed Rick was going to do it, And I was kind of disappointed when Negan stopped him.
That ultimatum was crazy. I was like, wow, like he's like actually going to cut his son's arm off, but obviously he stopped it. But I thought that was cool. That was cool.
Yeah. And like you told me before that when they had the guns to the other people's head, other Alexander, like the other group's heads, like Michonne and all them. You were like, yeah, I don't believe that they're gonna get shot.
It was another like suspense building thing where it just like didn't take for me. I was just like, oh, like this is happening. I don't know. Like I don't know what it was.
I agree. I'm like, oh, they're holding a gun to her head. Like, oh no, like, oh.
I think like I don't know what it was, but like the season, it's been long awaited. But for me, like I started seeing commercials again like last week and this week, and I was like, oh, Walking Dead's coming back, and then like that's just kind of how it was. You know what I mean? I wasn't like anticipating it, like waiting, like can't wait to see. It was kind of just like like it was like, oh, The Walking Dead is back, and then the episode just kind of happened. So it was a great episode, but
like we're not running around town screaming Walking Dead is back. You watch Walking Dead is back. You know what I mean? Like it should be. So which is like whatever, and like this was a great episode, but what as much as it's back and like this fan base, this show has a huge fan base, a loyal fan base, and I kind of also don't understand why, because we get jerked around constantly.
Yeah.
And like we kind of don't get satisfied, and I wouldn't recommend this show to anybody. So like, you know what I mean?
Which is funny to say after such a good episode, in my opinion, but I do agree with you just because it's the track record, and I know what you mean. But I probably will continue to watch the season and see where it goes. I do like it enough to watch on Sunday nights, especially with how bad football is right now. But I'll continue watching and see where it goes. I thought it was a great season opener, though. I will give them that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a great episode, but I still don't have any faith or any trust in the show, and I really don't. I'm hoping like everyone just starts dying, and then the show's over,
Put
so
you
I
out
can
of your misery like everybody else.
So that's what I'm looking for. That's what I want. I mean, so all right, I guess we got nothing else to say for right now. This has been Walker Talk, brought to you by Barely Sober News, reviewing Season 7, Episode 1, called The Day Will Come When You Won't Be. I'm George Pecoraro, and with me is John Smithson. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Barely Sober News, and we'll see you next week on next week's episode of Walker Talk, brought to you by Barely Sober News.